Welcome to the Kennedy Report. I'm Kennedy Hall. What is Fulton Sheen's advice to Elon Musk on free speech? You've obviously heard the news by now. Elon Musk, the eccentric billionaire, the richest man on earth, or one or two, depends on the week, on the quarter, the financial quarter. He bought Twitter. It was an incredible saga. It captured everybody's attention because, we wouldn't call him a Christian conservative, but at the same time, he definitely is not somebody that caters to what the left always wants about everything. And in fact, he makes fun of them all the time. So this move by Elon Musk is seen as something extraordinary, perhaps something that even will help the cause of Christians and conservatives because he's somebody who's against censorship. Now, the thing is, though, the idea of free speech has come up, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and so on and so forth. And that's a tricky subject. So before we get into before we get into Fulton Sheen's commentary on the subject, I want to read from an article from my friend Mike Parrott at Restoring the Faith. He wrote this article for LifeSite. But just before that, thank you for tuning in. And if you do like this video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the link in the description to see how you can help us grow. As you can see, our production is getting better by the week. This is all because of your support. Thank you so much for signing up for Patreon, all those who have, and for all the donations. We couldn't do it without you. Now, this is from the last page of my friend Mike Parrott's article. And he said, first, is Elon Musk even a trustworthy champion of free speech? Make no mistake, the Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and Boring Company founder is an unnatural ally, to put it mildly. Sure, he occasionally challenges the ruling class narratives by questioning overpopulation, ostensibly being opposed to forced vaccinations, and even casually referring to arch-villain Bill Gates as a knucklehead. That was pretty funny, actually. At the same time, Musk is a man seeking to microchip all humanity, merging computing with the human brain, beginning as soon as this year. This is hypothetical, but nonetheless, this is one of his goals. He was, quote unquote, super fired up about Biden, the fake Catholic usurper-in-chief, who was presiding over the continual slaughter of innocent human life by being a pro-abort, essentially. And he also continues and he says, this is my friend, the author here, he says, second, is so-called freedom of speech a worthwhile goal? That's actually a good question. We're going to get to that. He says, does everyone have really have a right to say anything he wants? Do people have a right to be wrong? Do blasphemers have a right to insult God, the Blessed Virgin Mary, Jesus Christ, and so forth? Are liars protected by free speech? And if they are protected, by whom? And he then goes through a litany of resources here from holy popes of the past who've talked about the unadulterated freedom of speech as actually being an error. So, how do we deal with this issue of freedom of speech as a Catholic? Because on the one hand, yeah, it's pretty easy to understand why we would not be able to just go around and saying whatever we want in every circumstance, because clearly saying a lot of things is sinful. But to understand freedom of speech, first we probably have to understand freedom, because that word is a difficult one for us to understand. And no one better than Archbishop Fulton Sheen to explain that for us. This is clip number 1, where Sheen gives us a quick overview about the nature of true freedom. Take a look.
Well, freedom is a word that's very often used and not very often understood. As a matter of fact, freedom has two sides. One is freedom from something, namely from constraint and force. The other is the freedom for something, namely a goal or a purpose. This is concerned with means, this is concerned with ends and destinies. This is the bridge, this is the city. And the two must always go together. You cannot have a freedom from something without a goal or a purpose or a perfection. I heard of a rich man who went up to a taxi driver. He said to the taxi driver, "Are you free?" Taxi driver says, "Yes, I'm free." The rich man left shouting, "Hurrah for freedom!" In other words, what's the use of being free unless you've got some destiny, some perfection? Now, let me show you how the two go together. Suppose you were going to take a trip. You were free to choose all your means. You must be free from constraint to take a train, free from force to take a plane, free from violence to walk. You may choose any means that you please. But you certainly ought to have a freedom for something, or to be going someplace. Otherwise, you'd be just like a ship at sea without a rudder and without a port.
So, essentially, what Fulton Sheen is saying is that freedom in the true sense boils down to two things: freedom from and freedom for. So, you have to be free from certain constraints in order to be free for achieving your goals. And this is really what freedom means in the Catholic perspective, is freedom to achieve your goals. So this is something that we're going through right now, which is why the idea that Elon Musk could come and sort of save social media and turn it into a place where we could say whatever we want, that's super appealing. Because from the perspective of having constraints, I mean, we've been constrained for a long time. We're still constrained. I mean, I'm constrained at what I can say, depending on the platform that I'm on, and this is why we have to speak very carefully. We can't really tell the truth about certain issues that have come up over the last couple of years. Things about elections. I mean, there's lots of things that it's very difficult for us to tell the truth on. And it really is a problem. So in that sense, yeah, we need to have freedom from the constraints that these, immoral, unjust governments have put on us. But at the same time, you think of that famous line from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Words have meaning, words have power. If you walk into somebody's house, you can't just say whatever you want. If you walk into my house and you say, X, Y, and Z expletive about God or, my family or something, I'll say, get out of here right now. I mean, get out of my house. You don't have the right to say that here. Whoa, hold on, man. I got freedom of speech. No, it doesn't work like that. You have a freedom to say things, but you don't have the license to say whatever you want in all settings. And how to enforce that, I'm not even going to get into that. That's a whole other political conversation, which perhaps at another day we could talk about different views on that, how you'd apply these principles. But my point is, we don't even have to go to the depths of Catholic doctrine to understand that, yeah, there are limitations of what you can say in certain areas. So what we really have to consider as Catholics about this whole Elon Musk thing and the free speech on Twitter and so forth, it's good that we're having more freedom from constraint, as somebody who promotes the idea of free speech is now getting into social media. But at the same time, we now have the power, assuming things continue to ameliorate as they have, and they have been already in this short time, we now have the power to say a lot of stuff that we couldn't say before. So should we just go out there and always say whatever we want in every setting? That's probably not a good idea. Again, the freedom, the ability to say whatever you want, the freedom from constraint against muzzling you, isn't necessarily the same thing as having the freedom for saying things that need to be said in order to achieve your goals. And what are those goals, and what would be the point of freedom of speech? Well, again, Fulton Sheen, this is our second clip, this is clip 2. He's going to explain to us the real nature of speech.
And he has no goal, no purpose. And so the modern world, instead of working toward an ideal, changes the ideal and calls it progress. Why we do not know precisely in our Western world why we are living. Why go on educating unless we know the purpose of a man? The essence of his freedom is not merely to be free from constraint, from violence. He must have some objective and goal and perfection in life. So we speak of freedom of speech as if it meant that there could never be any limitation upon freedom of speech. Certainly there is a limitation. Freedom of speech has an objective and a goal, namely the communication of truth and knowledge. I am not entitled, for example, to freedom of speech if I should abuse anyone on television. It should be taken away from me. Freedom of speech does not mean the right to shout fire in a theater. And all of our freedoms have certain goals and certain purposes and objectives. And the result is that the people of our Western world, simply because they do not know why they are living, they've never decided what they're going to do with their freedom, find it boring. And they would like to surrender their responsibility. They're full of anxieties and worries, and there's nothing in life that is quite as boring as a purposeless existence. And simply because our Western civilization has not found the meaning and the purpose of life, simply because it concentrates upon freedom from something, our Western world is strong only in war and not in peace. It is strong only in war because it has the basic objective, at least, of defending our own existence, but it is not strong in peace because it has no unified faith, no universal goal, no universally recognized purpose in life.
Wonderfully put by Fulton Sheen. This is why we love to cite him on this broadcast. So he explains how this disordered sense of freedom. So in the West, we have this idea that freedom just basically means I can't be told I can't do something. Again, that's half of it, freedom from constraint. But then there's another side of it, which we've mentioned already, is the freedom to do something useful or freedom for something. And he says so succinctly, the goal of speech is the communication of truth and knowledge. And this is basic natural law. You know, you would say, what is the goal of eating? The goal of eating is very clear, which is why when somebody goes against the goals of eating, we call that thing a disorder, right? We can apply this to sexual activity, to marriage. You know, there's an express nature built into human beings and metaphysics, and we follow those things towards their logical end for the thriving of the human person, the human soul, and so on and so forth, okay? So the goal of speech is the communication of truth and knowledge. So freedom of speech is a difficult topic to address as a Catholic because, as I said, popes of the past have rightly so condemned this sort of Enlightenment ideas that, you know, you should be able to say whatever you want all the time. It's never really been that way, never played out that way. But it is condemnable because, again, we don't have the freedom to blaspheme. We don't have the freedom to, you know, arbitrarily harm another person in all settings by the things that we say. Again, this is something perhaps in another episode or something we can talk about. How could we even approach the governance of this? That's a different thing. But for the time being, what we need to understand is it is a good thing that this one half of freedom is being restored in the social media context, at least with Twitter. We have the freedom from certain constraints, which means we can say things that are good. I mean, think about how many things could have been different over the last couple of years if, you know, social media companies and video companies weren't, you know, taking down information that was against the narrative, or, you know, stopping tweets about, you know, presidential laptops and things like that. You know, I'm trying to use my words carefully here. Things could be a lot different. You know, we know that social media is pretty much the driving force behind culture. President Obama knew this in 2008, and he used, and actually my friend Mike Parrott writes in this article I read, he writes how he was kind of the first president to really use social media. Donald Trump did the same thing. This is why they had to kick him off. So we have the freedom from constraints. But now what are we going to do with it? Are we going to go out there and we're going to say, I have freedom of speech, I have freedom of expression because they've taken away certain constraints, so now that means I can go and say whatever I want in all circumstances? That's probably not a wise idea. Now that we have the freedom from the constraint, we need to say, what am I now free to do? And ultimately that has to be to glorify God, to glorify His church, and to say true things in the right context. So is Elon Musk's move to take over Twitter, is that a good thing? I believe it really is a good thing. You know, politics in some ways is kind of like football. You don't always get to choose who's on your team. You don't always get to choose who your coach is. But all you know is you're on one side of the field and you got to go to the other side of the field, and you've got to work together with the cards you've been played, you know. And that's all you really can do. So sometimes you're consistently losing, so you got to rethink things, and sometimes your quarterback might be half decent, but throws a lot of interceptions. You know, you can see where the analogy goes with this. So Elon Musk is an unlikely ally, but he is removing constraints, at least in one area, which is very important. And there is a history of this in the church. You know, we could look back to what Constantine did for the church. I'm not saying Elon Musk is Constantine. What I'm saying is Constantine was a very flawed man, actually involved in some sort of murderous inter-family events. He promoted, obviously, the Catholic faith, but at the same time, he still was wishy-washy on the Arian crisis. He didn't get baptized till he almost died. lots that was really and amazing about him, but he still promoted a lot of errors, didn't have the best personal life. But it was a win for Christianity because he brought a way that he gave them freedom from constraint. So then the church was free for the proper goal of evangelization and so on and so forth. So we're in a microcosm of that right now with social media. We're being free from constraint. We have an unlikely sort of tech Constantine figure who's super imperfect and has some strange ideas. But for some reason, he's our friend right now. So I think overall it's a good thing, but let's be careful that this new freedom we have is for the glory of God. I think that's enough for today. So again, if you have enjoyed this video, please like this video, subscribe to the channel. Click the link in the description to see how you can help us grow so we can keep bringing you stuff. As I said, we keep improving our production quality. That's all because of your help. We can now afford to do so. Go to thekennedyreport.com. That's thekennedyreport.com. Again, thank you to everybody who signed up. And this has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time, God bless.